Welcome to the Regina Queen Show. I have here with me Shelly Edward Jorgensen. Shelly Edward Jorgensen is a survivor of rape. Shelly Jorgensen grew up in a home with her mother and father, but sadly, her mother was murdered by her father. Shelly is back here to share her story, to encourage those of you who are encountering, who are now encountering, and who has encountered domestic abuse to not give up hope. Shelly is now an author of Beautiful Ashes, published by Edgeworth Group, selling 400 copies. Hello, Shelly. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Regina?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to have you back here on the Regina Queen Show to share your story with us of what life was like growing up, being raped multiple times, and mother being murdered by your father. And I know, it's such a sensitive topic. And throughout your endeavors, you have written a book, a true story of your mother's death. So, can you share part of your story of what life was like growing up in the home?
Sure. Well, like you said, I grew up in a home with domestic violence. My dad was a abusive alcoholic with a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde personality, and and when I was 15, he ended up murdering my mother and burning our house down to cover it up. And then subsequently, my sister and I had to live with him for the next 2.5 years until his trial, and go through all that process. And there's many traumas that stemmed from growing up in domestic violence. And you mentioned that I'm also a sexual assault survivor. And I think that one thing that people uh, may not know or even realize is that when you grow up in domestic violence, it sets you up for all sorts of other victimizations, because as a child growing up in domestic violence, you learn to keep secrets. You learn that almost you have no voice, because in my home anyway, you one night you might stop dad from murdering mom, literally, and the next morning I call them the after morning breakfast, where basically dad would be up and sober and cooking homemade hash browns and sausage and eggs, and sometimes even fried green tomatoes for that matter. And we were just supposed to sit down as a family together and eat this beautiful meal and say nothing. You say nothing about. And I learned that from the very beginning. I mean, I would say probably, well, I talk about it in the book. My earliest recollection of understanding that my dad was a monster, I was 4 years old. And I knew that he was, that's when I knew. People always think, oh, the children don't know, or they haven't seen or heard. Well, that's not true. Your kids know what's going on. And through the process, I was trained to not say anything, which then it kind of set me up to become a victim of other predators, to the point that I was also molested as a child. And then I was raped 2 different times when I was 15. So it was a hell of a year when I was 15. Yeah, and pretty much I've learned to grow and try to find the lessons through all the adversity that I've faced in my life. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, what I just summarized there. There's a lot more, and that's why I wrote the book. I mean, the book spans basically from birth, and the last event in there was my stepdaughter's wedding, which happened in 2019. So I cover a lot of ground.
Yes. So, Shelly, can you share some of your story? Can you share your mother's story of being murdered by your father? Can you give us a little bit of what happened?
Yeah. So basically, when my parents got married in 1960, and my dad was abusive from the beginning, but my mom didn't want to be the first divorce in the family. And it was a different time. You always have to kind of put the lens on of what the cultural norm and acceptance was at the time, because and there's still women today that are there's millions of people today trapped in domestic violence. And it's very easy from an outsider to say, oh, well, if this happened to me or that happened to me, I wouldn't put up with that. I would just leave. Well, it really isn't that simple. And my mother, even though she grew up in the she was born in 1935. She was 50 when she was murdered in 1985, and she had a bachelor's degree education. She was a beautiful woman, and she was smart. She was charismatic. She had lots and lots and lots of friends, but most people, almost every person, with the exception of a handful, had no idea what she was enduring at the hands of my father. 6 months after they were married, he drug her down a flight of stairs naked into the gutter in front of their house. And you would think that would be an inciting incident to leave a marriage, but it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And it just got worse and worse and worse from there. And his go-to tactic was strangulation. So I had left October 14th, 1985 is when this happened. I had left the house to go to basketball practice, and my sister was at basketball practice. And so there was an incident that happened earlier in the day that I knew I could read the tea leaves by that time. I was 15. I'm used to monitoring the volatility of my father. And my sister had gotten in trouble earlier in that day. And I knew that there was going to be a potential for an argument between my parents. And so my mom got home, and I tried to create a diversion to prevent a fight. And because my ride was late, and I ended up leaving thinking everything was going to be fine because I created this diversion. Well, I left, kissed my mom goodbye, said I love you. Thank goodness I was in the habit of doing that, because that was the last time I saw my mother. The next thing I know, the neighbors were picking us up from the high school. My sister was at the high school as well. She was 2 years older than me, and telling us there was a fire at our house. And then everything kind of unraveled from there. It took, the event was very public. It was, we lived in Metro Detroit in a pretty affluent neighborhood. And so there literally was TV crews for all the major networks at the house. And on the 11 o'clock news, I watched my house be engulfed in flames. I was on the scene when I watched my mother's body be removed from the house. So there was a lot of attention given to it. all the major newspapers wrote articles for the next 2.5 years covering the case. The original autopsy said that my mom died of natural causes, which even the night of the fire on the news, they were announcing that it was arson, that it was suspicious fire. So, it's ludicrous to think that any autopsy would have ever come back as natural causes, because you don't have a 50-year-old woman in arson, is an arson fire, dead, and not consider foul play and proclaim natural causes on a death certificate. Now, I understand that, she was very badly burned, and so that it was hard to do a complete examination, and that the first medical examiner wasn't a seasoned expert. And I wouldn't think that, but I would think that logic would prevail and you wouldn't make that declaration. So that happened at the very beginning, which was in October of 85. And then I want to say it was late spring, early summer of 86 that I had gone to the cemetery. It was in May. I went to the cemetery because my mom's birthday is in May, and so is Mother's Day. And I noticed that there wasn't grass on her grave, and I was like, well, that's strange. Why is that? Well, then the next week I read that they had exhumed her body, and in that to do another autopsy by a more experienced medical examiner. And in that autopsy, they discovered a stab wound. So there's a lot of details that are hard to know, but I know that I know because of the history, and I know his go-to pattern is to strangulate, and but he ended up stabbing her too, and then carrying her body from the front of the house to the back of the house and dousing it in gasoline and lighting it on fire. So that's what happened to my mother.
Yes. And my heart goes out to you. And I know sharing your story, your mother's story, is really painful at times, in the midst of sharing your story. And I can just imagine how you feel. Just describing the way she was brutally murdered, it's awful, it's painful. And I just can, sometimes, like you said, you watched this crime on the news of your own home, the house that you grew up in.
And helped build.
Yes, some people, we never think that things that we see on TV could happen to us. It can happen to anyone. Mm-hmm. It can happen to anyone. So, Shelly, you wrote a book, Beautiful Ashes. And can you go into details about your book, the reason for the book, and what impact it has left on people who bought the book, as your book sold 400 copies? So did you get any feedback and, the impact that it put on people?
Yeah, it launched actually on my birthday, which was April 6th. So it's been out just a little over 2 weeks. We've sold slightly over 400 copies now, which is pretty good for an indie book. And basically, I'm getting the whole reason why I wanted to write the book is, and I'm an engineer, so writing is not my forte. I had a friend of mine that helped with the writing, and so the intention of writing the book in the first place was to try to give people hope in dealing with adversity. I've had so much adversity in my life, but yet I've managed to find a path to healing. I've managed to find a path to wholeness and happiness despite the challenges. And I'm not challenge free at this point. Nobody's challenge free ever. And so, but I wanted people to know that even the worst things that can happen are survivable. And not only can you learn to survive these events, you can learn to thrive again. You can learn to overcome them in such a way that they can be a powerful tool to catapult you forward in a greater way. I've learned so many. I've learned so much from the path that I've taken. I've learned so much. I've gained a lot. I've lost a lot, but I've gained a lot too. And the things that I gained are different than the things that I've lost. And at this point, it's hard for me to say that I would go back and change anything. Now, of course, I would love for my mother to have never been murdered. Of course, there's things that I wish could have been different. But at the same time, I understand that I wouldn't have the same perspective that I have. I wouldn't have the same level of empathy that I have. And I wouldn't have the same level of compassion and endurance and strength and long suffering and in a whole multitude of characteristics that I've gained from the learning that I've done. And I'm not saying that it's easy. It is not easy, but it is a choice. We choose how we're going to respond. And it's through our choices and our response that you can either make things stepping stones or stumbling blocks. Yes. And so the response that I'm getting, I have had all the reviews on Audible and Amazon are 5-star reviews. There's I think 34 on Amazon right now, and 15 on Audible, and then Goodreads. I don't know. I didn't know that Goodreads existed because I'm not exactly, the queen bee reader, and so. But, now that I've gone through this process, and mind you, if anyone's thinking of writing a book, I design cars for a living. I'm an engineer for the auto industry, and I'm not sure what is more complicated, building a car or publishing a book. So,
us women have so much power. We are really strong.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so Goodreads is another platform that it's kind of like a social media platform for book lovers, and you can have a free membership. And I have 67 reviews on Goodreads, and basically all the average is almost 5 stars on those 67 reviews. And the feedback that I'm getting from people is that they're getting the message that there's hope. There's a path to healing that you can find no matter what. And yes, I understand that everybody's path is different because we're all different. We all have different backgrounds. We all have different strengths. We all have different weaknesses. But yet at the same time, there is a path. And I've said this is kind of, I call them these Shelly 101s, is I always say life is a team sport, and we're here to help each other find that path for one another. And that's what I'm trying to do is open myself up, be vulnerable, because I know that not everyone's going to agree with my perspective, but it's my perspective based on my experience. And so now I recognize that I'm in a position that I can help a lot of people, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Yes. That's terrific, Shelly. That is really terrific. You are an inspiration for so many people who have came across your path. And also you've been an inspiration, for me as well, not to give up hope, although you encountered, the tragedies in your life, you still continue to strive and to move on and still uplift and encourage others as well. And that is, your resilience, is just so amazing to me. And I'm so happy to have you back here with me to share some of your story after launching your book, and I would like to ask you, have you came across any other women or anyone who has lost a parent who has been murdered by their spouse, and hearing their story, how did that make you feel? Did it make you feel not alone? Because I know sometimes we can feel alone when we go through these tragedies. So how did that make you feel? Did it give you some comfort to know that I'm not alone?
Oh, definitely. Well, here's the thing is, about 3.5 years ago, I started joining Facebook groups for trauma. I'm in a bunch of domestic violence groups. I'm in sexual assault survivor groups. I'm in murder trauma survivor groups. I was in a house fire trauma group, suicide prevention, child abuse, a bunch of different groups, because even long-term health groups, because I've experienced all these things, and my intent in joining these groups was to try to help. And I thought that I thought that was all I was going to gain from joining these groups, was I was going to give. That's what I thought. Well, I was wrong again. And I've found that by helping, I'm healing more. And I didn't even think I had more healing to do. And one of the and you know this, Regina, is being a survivor of somebody in your family being murdered is a very lonely place, because even though it's more common than it should be, it's still very rare. It's more rare than sexual assault. It's more rare than domestic violence. It's more rare than health issues. And so, when I was in the throes of hell myself, I didn't know anybody else. I didn't connect with anybody else. And so I've joined these groups, and I've met people that I've connected with deeply and that I love. And I joined this group in, I don't know when it was, but in December. The administrator of the group was going to host a mini class for because the holidays are really hard, especially the first ones. And here I am, I'm 7, almost 37 years out, right? So I've experienced many Christmases. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll join the group. I'll join this mini class so that I can be encouraging and helpful to the others in the group and try to help facilitate this group.
Yes, yes.
Well, first of all, I gained 3, 4 adored friends and so much peace and comfort and love and understanding that I had been seeking that I didn't know I was still seeking. And it's like this instant connection you have with these other survivors. And
yes, yes, yes. And I totally agree, because my story, after meeting people, in different groups, and a lot of our stories resonate with one another's. And I have came across some beautiful people as well who had encountered the same tragedies as I have myself. And like you said, we get a sense of connection to connect to other people and to help us heal. And I think that is, really great, to be able to have a platform to reach out to others, and it help us get through life. Um, I have, met another beautiful queen. She is so amazing to me, and you have asked about her, and Lois Hampson, and she is amazing to me. She has became a friend of mine's, and um, I have even chosen her, to be my life coach. And she is really, really amazing. She inspires me. She motivates me. She has been through a lot of pain and trauma throughout her life. And now, she's living life like she haven't even experienced any trauma, and that is beautiful. Not to forget our loved ones, not saying that we're going to forget our loved ones, but, just the power of the Most High that He gives us to continue to move on, to navigate through life and be a service to others and help lift others and encourage others and just to enjoy the abundance of life. So I do totally agree, with you of how, the impact has been amazing, and, meeting people, and me and you, we have also ourselves been following each other.
Yeah.
The day of your very first show when you appeared here on the Regina Queen Show.
Yeah.
And yes, so, and we stick together because of the tragedies that we endured in life. So yes, it gives us a sense of connection to connect together, and as well. And I have other women in my, that's with me in my United Women Empowerment Against Gun and Domestic Violence. I came across some amazing women there too as well. And they're, really good friends of mine. And, we support each other as much as we can. So I really do agree with that, And I thank you too for, being here, supporting me as well as I support you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And, it's nice to be befriended by, other people that are trying to do the same thing that I'm trying to do.
Yes.
You're doing an amazing job, being a voice for your son, being a voice for change, and just trying to uplift and inspire people to keep going and don't let things ruin you.
Yes. Yes. I couldn't continue without being a voice for my son and other victims that we lost to violence, because I know the pain, and I wouldn't want anyone to endure the pain, and even though some of us have to, I just want to be a support, and, just to keep our loved ones' name alive, letting everyone know that it is not fair, to be brutally murdered, and these senseless murders, it's just unexplainable. It's not fair. Nobody has the right to just go and just murder someone, for no good cause at all.
There's never a good cause, really.
There's never, yes. I mean, you have friends murdering their own friends, best friends murdering their best friends, family members murdering their own family members, just senseless. It doesn't make any sense. And, I mean, I just really couldn't, I just don't see it. I just couldn't put myself in the shoes of a murderer.
Right. Well, it's because you would never have the mindset to do that. You have the mindset to help and to love and to heal. And, it takes a very self-centered, selfish individual to commit murder.
Yes. And I would like to, say as well, I am not here to judge anyone,
Right.
although, some people, probably had to, do whatever, but I'm not here to judge anyone. I
Right.
just stand by what I stand by, and that is what I stand by.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't have enough information to judge anyone.
Yes.
You don't know what people's trauma is, you don't know what their background is, you don't know what their capabilities are. But so I agree with you. I'm not here to judge anyone either, but
Yes.
if you look at it, there's different characteristics that have to come into
Really.
play.
Yes. And Shelly, hearing your story, I did, try and to place myself in your shoes, just to, to see what was, like how, like, wow, your mother, your father, that's so painful. That is so painful.
Yeah, it's definitely been a long road. My sister and I were orphaned basically by the whole event, and it's been a long road, but
Yes.
it's okay.
Yes,
And,
it is.
and my mother came to promise me that it would be okay. So
Yes. Now, Shelly, you said once before that the neighbors were, there was a name that they will call your house, that they put on your house, of like a horror movie. What was the title of that? What was the title that they gave you guys, your household?
I don't
It
remember.
was some,
Probably the House of Horrors, but the thing was, is from the outside before all this broke loose, we literally looked like the Cleavers. I mean, I've recently had schoolmates that have read the book now, private message me and say, "Holy crap! I had no idea. I actually envied you and your family
Mm,
when I was a teenager because I thought that you had what I wanted." That's how concealed it was. And so it really was a shock to the community because it came out of left field. And that's, unfortunately, that's what happens is there's this concealment for sometimes decades that nobody really knows the truth. And that's why I'm a big proponent of always being kind to people, because
mm.
you don't know what somebody's struggling with. You don't know what's going on in their life, really. And especially now, with social media, people are always putting forth the best of what life is
Yeah.
giving them. And it's and everybody has those moments, right? Everybody has the Disney vacation, right? Or something similar, right? Maybe not Disney, but so everyone has moments and that are picture perfect. But
Yeah.
it does not mean that the reality is the same. And
Exactly.
and so it's better just to be kind. And the thing that I think about it is, how hard is it to be kind? How hard is it to say, you know what, Regina, I really like your hair. It looks cute today. Or I'm going to open the door for somebody, or, oh, I like your blouse. Oh, or,
Or, or
you
I love
know,
the color. I love the color you picked today for our banner.
yeah, and so it takes little or no effort.
Yes.
But those little things, even if you're in the grocery store and you say hi to the person,
Mhm.
that you're next to, you don't know if that's the only positive thing they had in their day. You don't know.
You can turn. You can. A person can feel so down in just one beautiful beautiful word, or just a hello can change that person's life, and they just go from upside down and to up. you
Yeah,
know they just walk with their head up high and put a big smile on their face. There's so much you can do, just by saying one beautiful word to someone, because you never know. I agree, you never know what someone else is going through.
right. Well, and the other thing that I learned too is that, you know, especially when you're talking around somebody who's dealing with maybe death or a severe loss, is there really is no words. I think a lot of times we feel obligated to try to say something comforting,
Mm.
and there are no words. To me, what mattered most was time, people's time and willingness to listen and hear me and just respond with love. And I didn't need advice, because there is no advice that helps you feel better. And sometimes the best of intended advice, um, isn't, it might be true, but it isn't ready to be received. And so then it hurts.
Yes. And sometimes people, couldn't can understand our pain if it hasn't happened to them. If you haven't lost a child, you wouldn't know my pain. You know, if you haven't lost a mother brutally in the way that you did by being murdered, no one, if it haven't happened to that individual, they wouldn't know your pain. And sometimes it takes patience. And as you speak of patience, it does take patience, with people, to understand what people go through. We can't get upset with someone because of a misunderstanding or something, because we're going to be doing things, out of the ordinary because of what we are enduring. We are going through a lot of depression,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, self-sabotaging, feeling alone. It comes and it goes. We can be sitting here today, smiling, but no one knows. It doesn't mean that we don't take our bed nap time and cry. We lay on our pillow and cry at night, missing our loved ones.
Right.
We go through a lot of, uh, we just go through a lot. And I just feel that, it takes patience to understand people who has been through a lot of trauma. So,
Well, and the healing process is not linear, nor is there a prescribed length that it should take anybody to grieve or heal.
yeah,
Grief is an expression of lost love.
yeah,
So it's an immeasurable it's an immeasurable cup. And so there is no right, wrong way to grieve. There is no length of time that is too much. It's, again, it's an independent journey for everybody, and that doesn't go for just somebody being murdered. That goes for any kind of loss.
anytime.
So, and what I've tried to learn to do and is extrapolate my experiences to put myself in somebody else's shoes based on what my knowledge is. And so it's and maybe I do this because I'm an engineer. I don't know, but I've always done this is I've always tried to see things from somebody else's point of view and put myself in their shoes and then try to treat them the way that I'd want to be treated. And always try to comfort others and be the best support that I can. And all of my experiences have driven me to do that even more. And so, even though I haven't lost a child to murder like you have, I lost my mother. And so I understand the connection between a child and a mother. And so, although I haven't experienced the same loss, I can understand that loss because Heavenly Father's blessed me with the ability to have empathy and blessed me with the ability to do that. And so I very rarely lose. Nobody's perfect, but I very rarely lose my patience with anybody because I try to understand where they're at with what they're dealing with, no matter what it is. And I also have come to the understanding that every single one of us is going to be pushed to our limits. You don't know. We all have different limits. But we're all going to be pushed to our limits. And we're all going to be pushed to learn the same lessons. And so
yes,
the method might be different, but the lesson is still the same.
yes.
It's, how do you learn patience? You have to be forced to be patient. How do you learn long suffering? You have to suffer long. Endurance is another one. All these characteristics that are Christ-like characteristics, we all have to learn. And we're all going to learn them in a different way. You and I maybe learned long suffering through the loss of a loved one. Somebody else might learn long suffering from having fertility issues. Somebody else might learn long suffering from having long-term illness, or a child who has autism. We're all going to learn that lesson a different way. And so just because I learned it differently in a more perceived dramatic way, it doesn't mean that my pain is any different than somebody else's
Exactly.
pain is going to be.
Pain is pain.
Yes.
Pain is pain. Yes. Thank you for that. Thank you for that message. And Shelly, we have Laura Hurley. She's with our group, the United Women Empowerment Against Gun and Domestic Violence. And she's a big, huge supporter. And she has lost her son to gun violence as well. And she has here in the comments, she said that I admire your strength and growth through your trauma.
Thanks, Laura.
Yes.
And I'm sorry for your loss. And I think that's a picture of your son, and he's very handsome.
Yes, that is a picture of her son. He's so handsome. And yes, we have a beautiful, beautiful family. Yes. So thank you so much, Shelly. And could you please let everyone know where to find your book?
Sure. Well, Beautiful Ashes, you can either go to my website, beautifulashesmemoir.com. There's links directly to Amazon on there, to the ebook, audiobook, or paperback. You can go directly to Amazon and type in the search Beautiful Ashes, Shelly Edward Jorgensen. It will take it right there. And it's available at Barnes & Noble. It's available basically anywhere books are sold online. You can download the audiobook from Audible and I believe iTunes, and the ebook is available through Kobo and Amazon. The paperback, like I said, Barnes & Noble. Even other retailers that carry books will carry my book. So it's available everywhere. If you have a problem finding it, reach out to me. This is an open invitation. My social media, it blows up every day.
Mm-hmm.
But if anybody needs just a friend to help in a tight spot, I'm here, and that's a sincere offer. So I will, as long as I can manage it, I will manage it. So I want to make myself available. I try to post life lessons basically 3 times a week. So if you want to follow me on Facebook or Instagram, I try to post basically inspirational quotes and things that I've learned along the way. And I'm going to just keep doing that. So that's what I do.
Yes. Thank you for that. And your book has made it to a 5-star.
Yes,
So,
I got a 5-star indie reader review, which is a professional reviewing organization. I've already achieved 4 #1 bestsellers in new release on Amazon categories. So I'm really happy with what's happening there. I just, I don't really care if I make a dime. That's not my goal. My goal is to help as many people as possible. So some people do this for different reasons, and my reason is strictly to help as many as I can.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And that is my reason too. My why is to be a service for humanity and, keep everyone encouraged to prevent violence. Yes. And yes, everyone, check out Shelly Edward Jorgensen's book, Beautiful Ashes, a true murder story. It will inspire you not to give up hope and help you navigate through life being resilient. And so, yes, Shelly, thank you so much for being here with me on the Regina Queen Show.
Thanks, Regina. Have a great night.
You're welcome. And thank you, everyone. We love you all. Remember, keep an eye on your loved ones. If you know of anyone who is encountering domestic violence or going through anxiety or depression, please reach out and get that person some help. We love you all. Thank you all for being with us on the Regina Queen Show. I'm founder of Uplifting Women in All Walks of Life, United Women Empowerment Against Gun and Domestic Violence, Sisterhood Nation, and Unity We Stand. Have a good day.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.